the Linguistics Department at Prince Sultan University. And I, alongside my two colleagues, Dr. Muna Sadin from the Translation Department and Ms. Jawahar Al-Hagbani, a research assistant at the university, will be running the room for today. Before we start our session, I'd like to remind you of a couple of highlights. So first and foremost, in terms of the question and answer session, that'll be at the end of every talk. If you have any questions, you won't be able to raise your hands during the session. Instead, I would like you to please leave your questions in the Q&A box that is located at the bottom of your screen. So it's different than the chat box. There's a Q&A box and it'll be labeled Q&A. We will only be checking there for questions. Also, if you have any thoughts or comments about any of the sessions or the symposium overall, please share them via Twitter using, there's a personal hashtag that we're going to leave in the chat. It's hashtag PSUALR 2020. And one more reminder for the presenters, during your talk, we will be flashing signs for 5 minutes and 2 minutes, just so that you guys keep in mind the time remaining for your talks. And we will also be recording the talks and it will be available to everybody later on. So best of luck to you all, inshallah. Our first speaker, inshallah, is going to be Ms. Iman Tayeba from Satif II University in Algeria. Her presentation is entitled Applicants' Self-Presentation During the Faculty Hiring Interview. So Ms. Iman, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a few minutes to share my screen. Okay, I'm really sorry for the delay. First of all, warmest greetings are extended to all the audience, and special thanks also to the organizers who brought this event to a happy end. It's my pleasure to join with you in this international symposium, which is on applied linguistics research. And of course, when we talk about applied linguistic research, we are talking about an umbrella term under which many areas of research can be listed. And one of the relevant areas of research is discourse analysis, whether spoken or written. The current presentation focuses on one type of spoken discourse, which is the job interview or the faculty hiring interview. And because the current presentation is a case study, I'm going to present you the layout of my paper so that you can follow me smoothly. We have an introduction in which you are going to tackle the background of the study, there is the statements of the problem, and then we have the aims of the study, major research questions, the method used in the study, major findings, and conclusion. Well, by way of introduction, the employability of postgraduates at Algerian universities is becoming of great concern to many parties. And this is due to the growing competitive employment market, the large pools of graduates and the short hiring windows. So recently we are witnessing a lot of postgraduates holding magister or PhD. And winning a faculty position at university is becoming a little bit difficult because it is very competitive. Why the job interview? In the faculty hiring, there is a process, or the process of faculty hiring is manifold. So applicants in order to join a university as assistant lecturers or as lecturers, they have to go through the faculty hiring process, which consists of the CV analysis in terms of experience, qualifications, publication, and of course, job interview. But because novice postgraduates, those who graduate recently, may have similar CVs in terms of qualifications and experience, they may have the same profile, so they may have the same grades. So it's their performance in the job interview that could make the difference in getting the job or not. So during an interview, an applicant is expected to demonstrate a positive image of oneself, which is to some extent impression management, that he or she has critical thinking skills, good communication skills in English. I mean, at least the norms of communication. So this is done through some specific linguistic choices to have a positive feedback from interviewers. Asking for information that was already presented in candidates' application suggests that interviewers are more interested in how candidates might perform than how they might inform. So we know that the information that usually interviewers ask during an interview are already presented in the CVs and in the application letter. But what matters is how is this applicant going to perform and at the same time compete with others to be the best or to show that he is the most suitable person for the position. A survey was conducted with some Algerian EFL doctoral students about their perceptions of the faculty hiring interview. And it showed that there is unconsciousness about selection procedures in the employment interview and needs to enhance applicants' communicative skills in the faculty hiring. And this is a very recent survey that was published on 2020. This study attempts to answer the call for investigating authentic faculty hiring interview. Thus, the current study aims at investigating investigating the differences in language strategies used by successful and unsuccessful candidates during the faculty hiring interview. Second, bring in those strategies for ESP courses to train students in this task. This study is derived by the following research questions. What are the language strategies used by successful candidates and unsuccessful candidates when presenting themselves during the faculty hiring interview? Second, how can these strategies used by successful candidates be brought into ESP courses? To answer this question, a micro-level discourse analysis of extracts from authentic recorded interviews is conducted to describe applicant linguistic choices while presenting themselves in order to get a positive feedback from their interviewers. A qualitative approach based on a conceptual framework. By a conceptual framework here, we mean that it is kind of eclectic, or let's say a discursive. It means it is based on different theories and not just one theory. Drawing on the SFL model, Halliday, and here we say that by the systemic functional linguistic model, we mean that language is a system of constructing meaning. So the SFL allowed a detailed analysis of the elements of the candidate's lexico-grammatical choices. And this means that what elements of language are used by candidates in order to convey meaning or in order to transmit their message to their interviewers. And also, the model is based on the impression management theory by Stebbins and Kresta. And of course, the impression management theory consists of two behaviors. We have the verbal behaviors and the non-verbal behaviors. Here we are concentrating just on the verbal behaviors. It means what applicants are saying, and not non-verbal behaviors like smiles, eye contact, and so on. And the third element in the conceptual framework is communication skills in terms of fluency, accuracy, informativeness, and specificity. And these norms of communication are found related to the maxims, of communication, of good and fluent communication. So the corpus consists of 20 authentic recorded interviews or faculty hiring interviews conducted at two different Algerian universities to recruit or to hire assistant lecturers in the Department of the English Language and Literature. So to explain more the model of the analysis, So analysis of applicant presentation seeks to answer this question, what? The what here, it means what linguistic choices has the applicant used? The how this language is used. I mean, is this is his speech accurate? Is it fluent? Is his informative? Is it specific? And the third question is why? Why, it means why did he use this way in presenting himself? And this is related to the impression that he is going to have on his interviewers in order to get a positive or a negative feedback. The job applicant or the interviewee self-presentation is usually the first and the foremost step in any academic interview for a faculty position. So, and this is why we have focused just on the first phase of the interview and not all the interview. I mean, just the first move when applicants are asked to present themselves. So when applicants supply more details, personalize their answers, and are more specific, they give better impression to their interviewers. And this is, of course, was the major finding of previous research in the same field. So the discursive analysis was done with 20 interview extracts to answer the following question. And this question, as I said, is the first and the foremost question in any interview and is very frequent. Tell me about yourself. Of course, I'm not going to present you the extract of all the corpus. I'm just going to take 2 extracts from successful candidates and 2 extracts from unsuccessful candidates, and then we are going to compare between the strategies used by the successful and the unsuccessful candidates. So let's take the first extract. So here the applicant was asked to present himself in this way. Who are you? Well, he answered this way. Who am I? Well, my name is P1 Unif 2, and this is, of course, the code of the candidate. I'm currently starting my second year as a PhD student in Name 1 University, the University of Name 1 in American Studies, where I graduated as the top of my class in a group that included a Fulbright belongingness. And here he means a master's student who studied in the USA or who benefited from the Fulbright scholarship. So I had my magister there. I had my BA in Name 2 University. I taught for 1 year in a middle school. I know it's a different job description, but it was an experience. So that's who I am, or who am I, as he said. Well, here, if we analyze the talk of this candidate in terms of our model, we find that first he echoed the statement of the interviewer just to gain some time to organize his ideas. And this is a strategy used sometimes by applicants to organize the talk. Second, he presented his career using a top-down strategy with precision. He started from his highest achievement, that is being a PhD student, talking about his magister degree and with precising the institution from where he got it, and then his BA studies, and then he talked about his experience. And he said that I know it is a different job description. Here he showed that he is aware of the job requirement of the position. However, he considered this as an experience. He also used some self-promotion tactics. By self-promotion tactics, when he said that I'm a top of my class, and he said, including a Fulbright belongingness, it means despite the fact that there was kind of competition, I was able to be the top of my class. So, and his presentation, as we see, was precise, fluent, and accurate. There was no back channels and no hesitation marks. And this is regarded as successful, of course, according to the feedback of the interviewers. Now, another example of a successful candidate. Can you talk about yourself, please? Of course, I'm going just to take some examples. Yes, sure, thank you. So, as I told you, part of me is like doing research and trying to seek knowledge wherever it is available. I chose education because I think it is the best way I can make at least a slight change through it. And I chose mainly foreign languages. I chose foreign languages because I believe it is that if somebody has to access to one language, he will have to access to at least more than one perspective, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to analyze or give you the keynotes about his speech. First, he presented himself differently by stating his philosophy of learning and teaching. And this is sometimes what is expected from the interviewers, is to see that different candidates. Second, he presented his experience as varied and rich. He said here, concerning my experience, I've taught in many places in the public sphere and in the private sphere, what I taught in, and then he named some examples where he had a previous experience. And then he engaged in some self-promotional tactics when he presented himself as a previous Fulbright winner, or a person who benefited from a Fulbright scholarship. And then we see that also his speech was clear, accurate, and fluent. At the end here, we see that the interviewer directly said, "That's why you have a great American accent." So he immediately gained a positive feedback from his interviewers. And of course, this is not all the interview, this is just part of it. Now, we move to see an extract of an unsuccessful candidate. So when the candidate was asked to introduce himself, he started like this. "My name is," he just gave his name. "Can you spell it, please?" Of course, the interviewer asked him to spell his name. Third, okay, now his answer now. "So I have just graduated from Magister in June from doctoral school of name 1, and I have studied my bachelor in name 2 university," and then he stopped. Another question from the interviewer, "And where are you from?" I am from name 2. "Where exactly?" Name 3. "Great, how old are you if you don't mind?" 39. "Have you taught before?" "No, I haven't." "Do you have any idea about teaching?" "Well, yes, but it does not think like experience. But I asked my colleagues who already teach. I often ask them about the problems they face and how they manage, etc." So if we analyze this talk following the same procedures, we find that his talk was very short, and every time the interviewers were asking for more information. And that's why we can say that his talk lack of the informativeness, or is marked with less details. And there is a sense of non-belongingness. You are applying for a teaching position and you say, "I have no experience," and okay, maybe he may be saying the truth, but he gave the impression that he has no relation with teaching. And of course, his speech is marked with more hesitation. Now, another extract of unsuccessful candidate. The same thing when answering the question of introducing himself. "Okay, doctor, PhD in translation studies in name 1. Graduated from name 2 university, specialty translation Arabic English 2016. Okay. My MA thesis was about translating major problems in translating marriage and divorce documents from English to Arabic. Okay. And I worked in name 3. I taught for 1 semester 2 modules, master students. Okay. Technical translation and business translation. I taught also, this was unclear, last year to name 4 university MA students of journalism, communication, and journalism sciences. This is in brief. If you have a question, well, here if we see the answer of the interviewer, or the question of the interviewer: "Have you defended your PhD or not yet?" Yes, yes, yes. Have you defended it? No, not yet. So here from the beginning, there is a hesitation in his speech, and it was not specific and not clear. So at the beginning, it's clear that by doctor, he doesn't mean that he has the PhD, but he means that he is a student of PhD, or he's still doing his PhD. So his speech was marked by a lot of hesitation and back channels, and it was not specific, in addition to the lack of cohesion in his talk. So in brief, if we compare, sorry, hello?
Ms. Iman, are you having a technical difficulty?
I think the internet was cut, that's why the presentation stopped, or I don't know. Okay, I'm going to finish. Just to compare the successful and the unsuccessful communication. Is it clear to you? Does it appear on the screen?
Yes, it does. Oh, I mean the slides, but not that specific slide.
Locked.
There you go.
Okay, if we compare between the, I don't know what's happened here. It's locked. I have some technical problem, I think. So if we compare the successful and the unsuccessful communication strategies, we find that for successful candidates, their speech is fluent, accurate, specific, and precise. In addition, they have what we call sense of volubility. It means they provide information without being asked for this information. In addition, they indulge in some self-promotional tactics to show that, to speak about their personal achievements, which enable them to be best candidates for the position. Now, for the unsuccessful candidates, it's the opposite. We find a lot of maybe back channels and hesitation marks, in addition to the lack of specificity and the lack of informativeness. They have to be asked every time or given prompt in order to supply more information needed. Now, what happened to this? Okay, I'm obliged to finish without the slide, I think.
Yeah, it's okay. You can go ahead.
No problem. Okay, so as a conclusion, in answer to the research questions, those strategies should be trained or should be used to design ESP courses to train students or university students in this task based on their needs and also based on authentic materials. So students should be exposed to such authentic materials so that they know how the situation is managed through the faculty hiring interviewing. Of course, in terms of the study is limited in the small size of its corpus. So in the future, further studies should take larger samples so that it can yield more details and more reliable data. Also, in this study, just one phase of the interview that was exposed, which is investigated, which is the initial phase, the introduction phase. Further studies we call for the investigation of all the interview, for example, the negotiation of expertise and other technical issues related to teaching. And the last thing is that this study was a micro level of analysis. So using a mixed method of analysis or micro and macro level would, of course, enlarge the scope of the study and yield more beneficial data for further research. That was all. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope that my presentation was beneficial, and I'm really sorry for the technical problems that I faced throughout this presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Iman. We appreciated the highlight on such a nervous process for a lot of people. And if anybody has any questions, Ms. Iman, if you can leave your email in the chat box, and then they can just contact you directly, that would be great.
Yes, thank you.
So we're gonna move on to Mr. Hussamuddin Atiyah. But before that, I'm just gonna remind the attendees and the panelists of a couple of things. For the attendees, again, if you have any questions, leave them in the question and answer box down below at the bottom of the corner. And then for the panelists, when your time is, when you have 5 minutes remaining and then 2 minutes remaining, I'll flash a card and you'll be able to see that reminder. All right. So without further ado, we have Mr. Hussamuddin Atiyah from the American University in Cairo. His presentation is entitled An Egyptian Model of Community Language Learning, or CLL. Mr. Hussamuddin, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll be more than grateful if Ms. Iman stops sharing her screen so that I can share mine.
Yeah, let me do that. There we go.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see me?
And we see the interesting background behind you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Hussamuddin Atiyah. I'm a full-time faculty of rhetoric and composition at the American University in Cairo, and I act as the director of academic community engagement program as well. I'm so thrilled to be here today and thankful for Prince Sultan University for hosting this great event. I've been attending on and off many other presentations, and I see the diversity, and of course a big clap to the organizing committee for putting together such an interesting program. First of all, I'd like to talk about us as teachers in our initial preparation stages. Usually when teachers are involved in their teacher training in the ESL, EFL arena, there is a practicum part, and there comes the idea I'm presenting today. I'm presenting a model of implementation for community language learning that has been adopted by my university. So what is community-based learning or service learning? Because in the literature, you will see that it is sometimes called CDL or SL, referred to in sources. According to my university, community-based learning is a teaching methodology that purposefully advances course learning goals through service offered to a partner community. And so if we are to apply that to the language learning context, we try to offer the teaching service to a community that is in need for this service. My university offers liberal arts education, and we're advocates of this methodology. As part of this message, we are offering to our undergraduate students opportunities for experiential learning. And so the LING 2210 is a course that is offered by the Department of Linguistics. It's the teaching methodology course that implements the Cambridge CELTA course. It is an elective for secondary level students and is a requirement for linguistics minor. And of course, it is a credit-bearing course. We use the CELTA curriculum as pointed out. The duration of the course is 3 months. However, like we all know, there is the practicum component. And when I did my ESL teacher preparation, there was this problem that always faced us as training teachers. And to be specific, it was the fluctuation of those learners. So sometimes we will have learners, sometimes we will not have them. And this is where the problem starts. So participation rates, which again renders the learner level inconsistency. You cannot form classes available for your teachers who are training to be ESL, EFL teachers consistently, because the classroom makeup does not have this consistency in a learner level. Also, it's very difficult to trace any progress with regards to student teachers and learners, since the participants in the program are not stable, and there is attrition usually that takes place over the programs. Learning objectives remain unachievable sometimes. With some teachers, they are more achieved than others. So there isn't this goal of standardization. And of course, this undermines the course credibility and the type of practicum that our teacher training participants are encountering. So what I'm proposing to you in the form of a presentation derived from a paper is that you adopt a CLL, or community language learning approach when you're implementing a language methodology course. I'm going to introduce some principles in CBL or service learning that can be implemented by any program that hosts under it teacher training. So first of all, find the right partner or NGO to establish a partnership with. This should be someone who connects you to a number of participants who are in need for language courses. Introduce your goals to your partners, and this might take some training meetings, extensive meetings between you and the partner, so that they are well aware of what's going to happen with the participants they are introducing this to. Our partner currently is Mostra Foundation, and Mostra Foundation is an NGO that addresses governmental university students who are in need of training in general, and language training is part of it. So they act as our liaison with the students that are taught by our English teachers who are undergraduate students in my university. Then we need to agree on required services to be offered and the element of reciprocity, and that is the exchange of benefit between us. So we're providing training, language training that is of rigorous quality to the foundation and its participants, while our students are benefiting because their practicum is not jeopardized by the factor of attrition as the courses go on. Then there is this the signing of the MOU. So you have to draft a memorandum of understanding with the NGO so that you both entities understand your responsibilities and your responsibilities and other elements that are going to be covered through your agreement. I'm including my references at the bottom of every slide, and then of course I will share with you a reference page in the end. When we receive requests from our NGO or the partner, we take our students to a placement test. The placement test is following the Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFR. And of course, our students create language competency question bank items, and it's part of their course load. This again makes the program the ownership of our students who are training to become teachers. And of course, we administer the test 1 month before the beginning of the semester so that our teachers are able to meet with their students, but in the appropriate levels that they've been assigned to according to the competency test that they were given. Undergraduates as teachers and course designers is one of our goals in this program. So we entrust our students because they are trained during their methodology class to assess the needs of the learners and prepared to deliver tailored language content. They also learn during their methodology class to use a communicative language teaching approach, and they learn how to provide appropriate feedback. The role of reflection. So during the course, our teachers will not only deliver content in their practicum, but they will also be reflecting on the experience they have had with our participants. All the pictures I'm sharing with you on the slides are property of my program, and they were taken during actual classes. So these are some of the different advantages, the privileges that our students get because of the reflection component linked to their language teaching course. So their reflection will help them apply knowledge, analyze concepts, theories, construct opinions, assess problems and solutions, evaluate experiences, derive new meaning and new knowledge, set goals for the transfer, modification of learning, engage in self-discovery. And I'm so thrilled that today Ms. Iman introduced difficulties that teachers encounter or to teachers to be encountered during the interview process. In this program, we try to offer to our student teachers an opportunity of actually working before they graduate. And you could think of it as an internship. And of course, this improves their abilities to work in the workforce later on when they graduate. The element of reciprocity is extremely important. So thinking about our student teachers benefit is important, but also thinking about the students who trust us with this very important participation. So when our teacher students and the learners, they learn that this is a partnership and is not, you know, any kind of you know, giving for no exchange. It is a partnership between those two entities, the teachers and the students. This guarantees that they see trust being built. Many of our teachers actually give much of their time after the time allocated for the classes. Trust is built, so their students trust them with helping them with life choices, professional choices, and of course their language learning. They form long-term friendships and mentorship that lasts. And of course, there is the opportunity to network, either offered by the student teachers or the learners. And of course, that's the very important component. We're trying to give our students at AUC the real life experience before they graduate. Preparation for the job, as I just mentioned a while ago, when they are actually working as part of a credit-bearing course, they become ready for the market, for the job market later on. Sustainability is an important component in a CBL course. In other words, if your student teachers I mean, keep joining a methodology course and you cannot provide them with students to teach, and students who are placed in homogeneous classes of level, and you know, people who have been actually working and motivated to attend the program, it is difficult to see how the credibility of your program would build. So you will need to align pedagogical goals to the services offered. So make sure always that your goal is teaching language and that your partner expects that and nothing more than that. There needs to be clear communication with all parties involved. So we are in close communication with our partner, the NGO. We're in close contact with the professors who are teaching the methodology courses so that we always align goals. And of course, we're in communication with the students who join our CBL program. Acknowledging all stakeholders is a key to forming a sustainable relationship. And so in a following slide, we'll be talking about how we do that. We survey everyone for satisfaction and improvement by giving out, surveys and questionnaires at the end of every round so that we make changes appropriate for the improvement of the program. A very important component in a community-based learning course is celebration of success. And in my previous slide, I was talking about acknowledgement of all entities involved. This does not have to be a high expense event. I mean, something that recognizes the efforts of all entities involved, using certificates of appreciation or giving speakers an opportunity to talk about their experiences during the small ceremony would be a great idea. Also, this helps a lot in creating a sustainable relationship between all the entities involved. We have been working with this NGO for 5 years so far. The role of ACE, or my program, is to maintain communication with ESL methodology instructors. We initiate and maintain communication with community partners. We give orientation and supervise the classes on campus, which have now turned online because of COVID, of course. And we collect feedback periodically to improve quality for all parties involved. We plan celebratory events to award certificates, like was mentioned before. My list of recommendations, I mean, is quite large, but let me quickly take you through that. Trust in the capability of undergraduate students as teachers of ESL, EFL, because in the program they have proved to be more than efficient. Provide learning experiences related to the real world to your students. Don't be afraid to experiment and learn from your mistakes. Review your institute's current MOUs for partners that could be established without having to shop for partners outside the lists. Build partnerships based on reciprocity, give and take. Build a team of students who can volunteer in the program, which we have in our program. Many of our former students volunteer to serve in the program even after when they finish their course. And finally, maximize on the benefits of the partners by making their cooperation with you worth the while. Be sure that building your community can attain a nation's development. Here's my list of references, and I'd like to thank you for your attention. And here's my email if you'd like to ask any questions, you'd like assistance with any community-based learning, especially related to languages. And if you have an idea for a partnership, I'm also open to that. Thank you very much. And I think I have time for Q&A now.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. We have a question regarding your community education initiative of teaching English to AUC workers. I know you mentioned that briefly. If you can maybe expand on that and possibly answer as to why you went for those workers at AUC.
That's a great point. One of the university's goal is to create a very positive community environment on campus, and it started as a student initiative. So one of our students during her breaks had a conversation with one of the workers on campus. She was a common cleaner, and the student chatted with the lady. The lady expressed interest in learning English to help her children with their language classes. And so our students started working with her on daily basis. And then this worker brought more workers who needed help with their children. And then we took the idea, we expanded on it, and I think many of our students commented afterwards is that those workers who were invisible to them before became very recognizable and very appreciated on campus when they started interacting with them during the informal classes and afterwards during the classes. Unfortunately, 3 years ago, the university started outsourcing, especially cleaning staff on campus, which jeopardized, of course, the credibility of our program. And so we had to shop for another community partner. So now our AUC teachers or student teachers teach both workers at AUC and undergraduate students from Helwan, Cairo, and Ain Shams University, who are students at governmental universities in Egypt. I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. If anybody has any more questions, you can go ahead, type it in the box, or Mr. Hassam, if you would like to leave your email in the chat box, and then we can share with everybody.
Sure, we'll do that.
Really interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I stopped sharing my screen.
Perfect.
And I'll
All
be
right.
typing my email in the chat box as you instructed.
Yes. All right. So let me just check our next speakers here. Yes. So our next speaker is Tawfiq Adebayo. Again, I'm just going to remind you guys of questions. Always leave them in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. And then we will always leave everybody's email at the end of the talk as well. Let me just get the information. So our next speaker is Mr. Tawfiq Adebayo from Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. His talk is entitled Translanguaging, a New Approach to Mother Tongue Education in Africa. So Mr. Tawfiq, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see your screen.
Oh, okay, all right.
And then just as a reminder, when you have 5 minutes remaining, I'll flash a card so you guys can see it. And okay, all right, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. So today I'm going to be talking about the Science in Yoruba project that we did in Ibadan between December 2017 and March 2019. It is a collaboration between linguists and domain experts from sciences, and we translated the basic science textbook into Yoruba, and we went ahead to teach it to students. The project actually came from the assumption, from the mother tongue education assumption that students understand conceptual ideas better when they are taught in their mother tongue than when they are taught in a second language or a foreign language. So apart from the UNESCO report of 1953, which came to the conclusion that the best medium for teaching is the mother tongue of the pupil, there are quite a lot of studies from around Africa that came to similar conclusions. Excuse me. But despite this overwhelming evidence in support of mother tongue education, African governments, most governments in Africa are not really serious or not really willing in investing in mother tongue education. And this is the reason why government-funded NTE programs are very rare. It's also the reason why the existing transitional literacy policies that we have in countries like Nigeria are not efficient. In Nigeria, for example, so the National Policy on Education stipulates that a child is to be instructed at school in Yoruba in their first 3 years of primary education, including the pre-primary education. But studies have found that most schools, especially private schools, simply just use only English to teach the student from the very first class of education to high schools. So it's also the reason why some governments in Africa are actually switching back to English-only policy. We have an example in Ghana. We have another example in Zanzibar, Tanzania. So the second problem that that my paper is addressing is that research on mother tongue education has focused mainly on what governments can do and what governments have been doing and what the government should do. And so there is little attention to what private individuals can do. So my proposal in this paper basically is that given this situation where the government is not really interested in promoting mother tongue education or in investing meaningfully in mother tongue education, the onus falls on private individuals to do the little that they can to make sure that kids in that community have access to quality education. So, but the question is, how can these private individuals who may be interested in doing this kind of community engaged work do it? There are frameworks that they can use, and the answer to that is not really. So since the focus is on what government is doing, little attention has been paid to what and how private individuals can help when it comes to mother tongue education. So I am suggesting that there are three kinds of frameworks that private individuals are going to need in order to do this kind of community engaged work. And these kind of frameworks, I think, will have to do with collaboration, with translation, with pedagogy. But because of time, I'm not going to talk about much about collaboration and translation. I would focus on pedagogy. So when we finished translating the textbook, the next thing was to go to schools and use the translation to take the students. But we had to be we needed to pay attention to certain factors. Because these factors were going to determine what kind of pedagogy we will be using. So the first factor is government policy. So in the class that we are interested in, the government policy stipulates that the students should be instructed in English. And as a result of that, the language of assessment is also supposed to be in English. So this means that our pedagogy must not subvert government policy, but complement it. So another factor that we also had to be very careful of is parents. There are reports in the literature of parents, taking away their kids from mother tongue education classes. And then there's also one particular example from Iguanosi and Peter, 2016, about parents going to school to ask specifically if they teach students only in English before they enroll their kids there. So we have to be very careful about these parents, about some of these parents who may have concern about the project. Another thing that we have to consider is students' languaging practices. So you have a situation in Nigeria where, apart from a growing number of children who are acquiring Nigerian English as their first language, you have a lot of Yoruba kids in southwestern Nigeria speaking Yoruba language in their community, in their home, with their family, and in their neighborhood. But when they get to school, the national policy on education expects them to carry out, to learn in English, a language that they do not speak in their daily activities. So another factor is the teachers' translanguaging practices. So we learned from some of the teachers that we worked with that sometimes they use English, they switch between English back and forth when they discover that the students that they're teaching do not understand a particular thing that they are talking about. But this practice is not really well documented. So given all of these factors that I've mentioned, so pedagogy had to be designed in a way that it does not subvert government policy, in a way that it is responsive to, it is going to be responsive to parents' concern. So we decided that we were going to make use of translanguaging, in which case Yoruba and English are going to have a role to play in the classroom. So rather than have a situation, which is actually the practice for mother tongue education, to have purely Yoruba instructions. So we have instructions that go back and forth between English and Yoruba. So, but first, let us understand what we mean by translanguaging. So translanguaging is using one's linguistic repertoire without regard for socially and politically defined language names. So say, for example, someone who can speak Arabic, who can speak Yoruba, English and French, if they go back and forth between these languages in their daily conversation, they can be said to be translanguaging, meaning that the focus basically is what we do with language rather than the language itself. So a translanguaging pedagogy then encourages students to make use of their full linguistic repertoire in their construction of knowledge. And this actually is from the assumption that we cannot separate our languaging practices, that is the kind of language that we use, and how we use language from the way that we perceive the world. Meaning that in the classroom, students should be encouraged to make use of all the linguistic resources at their disposal. So if a student understands Yoruba, if a student understands English, we should encourage them to make use of all these languages that they know. But our translanguaging pedagogy also has to be designed in two forms. And this is in response to the situation that we met on ground at those schools. We discovered that some schools actually do not really have enough teachers. In some situation, our collaborator, one of us, actually has to assume the role of the regular school teacher. So based on that, we have two kinds of translanguaging approach. The first one is what I call a sequential translanguaging approach. And I'm referring to this as a sequential class because the first thing that we had to do was have the teachers go in to teach the students in English as recommended by the government. Then a science and Yoruba collaborator will go in to explain the same concept in Yoruba. But the important thing is that exposition, that is explanation, illustrations, examples, and so on and so forth, take place in Yoruba while scientific terms are retained the way they are in English. And the reason for this kind of method basically is to respond to the assessment problem that I mentioned the other time. Say, for example, a student is asked a question, dash is anything that has weight and occupies space. So if the student were to supply an answer in Yoruba, say, for example, Ogbayibewan, which is the Yoruba equivalent for matter, then that answer would be marked wrong because it is not in the language that is officially, that the student is officially expected to deliver the answer. So this method is in response to that. So the second translanguaging approach that we use is the one that I call simultaneous translanguaging. And this is called simultaneous basically because the Science in Yoruba collaborator teaches the class. No permanent teacher is involved. So the teacher, the collaborator provides explanations in Yoruba and English simultaneously if he discovers that the students are not following up, or if he discovers that they are not really getting what he's saying. He first explains to them in English, then in Yoruba, and then back to English, and then back to Yoruba. So, but what remains constant is that scientific terms are given in English, and that is basically because of the assessment problem that I mentioned. So this is an example of such a class. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but it's just to give you an idea. Okay, let me just, I'm not sure I'm sharing the audio with you, but let me just go ahead and tell you what is going on in this video. So the teacher first asks the students, what do we call sensory organs? And none of the students respond to that question. So he went ahead to rephrase the question in Yoruba, and that is when he discovers that they don't actually know what are called sensory organs. And so he asked a series of questions in Yoruba, questions like, what do you use to see? The students respond eyes. What do you use to hear? The student responds ears, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, it tells them in Yoruba that that all of these things that they have mentioned are what they call sensory organs. And then he also explained the same thing again in English. So this is an example of the simultaneous translanguaging class that I mentioned before. So to recap, we had to use translanguaging pedagogy because of those factors that I mentioned that has to do with government policy, that has to do with parents' consent, and that has to do with the language of assessment and the languaging practices of the kids. So, so how should we evaluate the project? So one straightforward way to evaluate the project is to look at the student examination scores. And so what I did basically is to collect the results of these students at the end of our intervention and compare it to their examination scores before we arrived at the schools. And as you can see, with a significant value of 0.918, you see that at a significant level of 0.05, you see that there is no statistically significant difference in the students' result before and after our intervention. So one implication of this is that our intervention did not negatively affect the student official assessment, meaning that we were able to avoid the problem of students supplying answers in Yoruba when the official requirement for them is to supply answers in English. Excuse me. But on the other hand, it also means that our intervention did not have any positive impact, any statistically significant positive impact on the student examination results. And so does that mean that our intervention was a waste of time? Not really, because the amount of time that we spent with the student is very, very small. We only spent 3 months with them after our translation. So we were there doing serious teaching for only 3 months. So for a project like this to begin to have impact on student examination scores, it has to go longer for longer. A similar project that was conducted in the 70s actually went on for 6 years and then came to the conclusion that the students that were taught mainly in Yoruba performed better than those that were taught using the government's recommended curriculum, that is the transitional policy, and their colleagues that were taught only in English. So basically, the project will have to go for a longer period of time to have an impact on the examination scores of the students. And another reason why to think that our project was not really a waste of time is because there are similar reports in the literature. Cantera and Escamilla 2016, for example, found that in the US, studies that evaluate bilingual programs found that there are no significant improvement, but that is only when they pay attention to short-term effects such as oral proficiency. But studies that look at long-term effects such as cognitive development found that students who took part in bilingual education actually performed better. They actually benefited a lot from the program. That we have on the children and their daily activities, and what we found. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, it was breaking up a little bit.
So we a little bit. Okay, I'm sorry for that. So we found that some students that were passive were actively engaged. And this was actually reported by a teacher at one of the schools, Orogun Grammar School in Ibadan. She told us that a particular student who was not active in English language classes, that is basic science classes delivered in English, became actually passive when we were explaining things to them in Yoruba. So another thing that we noticed was that the students were excited to participate in class discussions, and this should not be surprising. The discussion is taking place in a language that they speak effortlessly. And so there is no, they don't really have that sense of stigmatization that maybe their use of English is being censored or something. So another thing that we found is that, in one of the classes, the students were able to distinguish between science and folk science. Some of them were surprised to learn that chemical can also be good. And their assumption that chemicals are bad basically is based on the music that they hear, which portray chemicals as bad substances that is very harmful to human body. So some of the achievements of the project basically is that we're able to provide complementary Yoruba instructions. We also have a STEM manuscript that is in the process of being published in Lagos. And we also have instructional materials that we left at the schools at the end of our project. Apart from that, we were able to initiate a talk with the Oyo State Minister of Education to extend our methodology, the translanguage methodology, beyond the 3 schools that we worked with. And also we have a social media campaign. We have social media campaign, STEM discussions in Yoruba. And this goes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The challenges that we encounter basically is that the process of publishing the textbook has been slowed down due to COVID-19. The schools also had insufficient teachers, and our inability to extend the pedagogy beyond the 3 schools. So in conclusion, basically, since given the current situation in Nigeria where governments are not really serious about promoting mother tongue education, I think that the way forward is for private individuals to make sure that students in their community have access to quality education by going there to volunteer and by going there to facilitate translanguaging in the classrooms. This can be understood in the same way that people go to a park to volunteer. But for individuals who are going to be doing this kind of work, it should be mentioned that the focus should be on long-term effect rather than on short-term effect. I would like to conclude by thanking my collaborators, Oyita Babatola, Samuel Jegede, Samuel Awelewa, and Erife Mfuluawu for the contributions and for doing the project with me. I would also like to thank the Mellon Graduate Fellowship in Community Engaged Scholarship at Tulane University for funding the project, the Chemistry Department at Tulane University for providing the instructional materials, and for the Chemistry Department at the University of Ibadan for facilitating the importation of the instructional materials. Thank you so much. These are my references.
Thank you, Mursadia. Well, that was really, really interesting. Again, a reminder for everybody, if you have a question, just go ahead and drop it in the Q&A box and we'll read it out to him. I have a question, and I'm not sure, and I apologize if it's a question that can't be answered simply, but in terms of like code switching and translanguaging, what is the difference?
So the difference basically is that when you are doing, for translanguaging, it's supposed to be practice-based. So we are basically interested in what people are doing with language, and what the main thing that people are trying to achieve when they are using different languages. So translanguaging is supposed to be practice based. In this case, we are not really interested in which part gets code switched and which part is not, and it does not get code switch. So basically, we are looking at the linguistic repertoire as something unified. So and there is no demarcation between languages. So we are simply looking at the linguistic repertoire as an holistic whole, which people can actually draw from in order to carry out their day-to-day activities. So basically, whereas social linguistics will be interested in, okay, so which part gets switched, and and how often, and so on and so forth. Translanguaging doesn't really look at the structure, because it doesn't make a demarcation between the languages, just as we have it in social linguistics. So I would say that translanguaging is code switching, code mixing, and so on and so forth, but with the attention paid to the linguistic repertoire as a resource that people make use of, rather than as something that is neatly demarcated for languages.
That's interesting. So, I mean, is it related to like the idea of a pidgin language, like how it starts, the genesis of it, where it's not about...
Right. Go ahead.
I mean, like the genesis of a language, when a pidgin language is developed, it's not about, like you said, a demarcation of this is where this language ends and this is where this term is borrowed or whatnot. It's the end result, that's the goal. So if you mix it, it's kind of like you're creating a newer language, mixing all those languages together. Am I getting that right?
Not quite, because pidgin is a beast of a different kind entirely. But for translanguaging, even pidgin can also come into play. Say, for example, if someone is speaking English, for example, and using Nigerian pidgin, in the midst of that, they will still be regarded as translanguaging. So translanguaging doesn't really pay attention to whether a new language is being created or not.
Okay.
The focus basically is that the linguistic repertoire is a resource on its own, and that it is not demarcated, it is not sliced up for each of the languages. So the attention basically is not whether, this language stops here, another language begins, but rather that the linguistic repertoire basically is that people have linguistic resources with them, and then they make use of these resources as they see fit, without necessarily paying attention to named languages, paying attention to the demarcation that that we actually have for different languages. I'm not sure I'm answering your questions correctly, but
it makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think the important point is that the focus basically is on language as a resource, rather than on paying attention to which language
What is being
gets
used.
used. Or, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. It makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. If you don't mind leaving your email in the chat box so that we can share it with the other attendees.
Sure.
And then that way they can contact you if they have any questions or thoughts they want to share. That was really, really interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Adiabo. All right, next we have a break.
Thank you
Actually,
so
we're
much.
done. Thank you very much. So we're going to stop here. We have a break and then we'll meet, inshallah, we'll reconvene at 18:30 KSA time. So we'll meet back in the room at that time, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start with the last item that we have, which is a workshop. Mr. Adiabo, we actually have a question in the Q&A box.
Oh, okay.
So somebody's asking how translanguaging works well in a monolingual context or an EFL context. They said that they found many studies conducted in bilingual and multilingual contexts, but not monolingual contexts.
Right, okay. To be sure, to be clear, the context that I described in my talk is also multilingual. It is multilingual in the sense that, of course, even though the use of English is a little bit low, people use English in the community. And so I think that what I described is also applicable to multilingual setting. As for EFL class, I think that translanguaging can be a very good resource. For example, if you are teaching maybe Arabic students how to speak English or how to use English for specific purposes, if sometimes you use, you go back and forth between Arabic and English, I think that it will help them a lot to learn the lessons that you are giving them. And I'm saying this because in one of the projects that was conducted on Yoruba in the 70s, the project that I mentioned earlier, so in that project, they taught English using Yoruba as well. So meaning that they taught the kids at some point they also used English, they also used Yoruba to teach them English, and they discovered that the students actually performed better in the English language class. So I think that translanguaging can also be very efficient in EFL class, but I would also like to mention that, of course, there are other kinds of methods that can be complemented with translanguaging. Say, for example, the immersion style, where you ask the student to maybe do role plays only in English. I think that combining translanguaging with other methods may actually prove effective. I have not done it myself personally, but I think it might be a good thing to do and to think about.
All right, thank you. Any more questions, everybody? Great, okay. All right, I'll just copy your email to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so we're all done here for now. We're gonna take a break and then we'll meet back at 18:30 KSA time. See you all then.
Okay.